Well, hi there. Last Dinosaur December, we discussed cockatoos and the fact that they are incredible, personable birds that require an absolutely astronomical amount of attention for about a half a century. An unrelenting full-time job and best friend that you will someday leave to your grandkids. But a completely new way of living your life. There is a reason that they are one of the most surrendered of all pets. Most people don't actually want to devote their entire lives to a Peter Pan toddler in a bird suit with a bolt cutter and no diaper. But I promised you that there is a cockatoo that is a little bit less intense. If you like the basic idea of having a cockatoo, but you want something that won't consume the rest of your life. And here it is, the cockatiel, which is just as much a cockatoo as any other. They're nested right in the middle of the cockatoos, like snakes are nested in the middle of the lizards, or like birds are nested in the middle of the dinosaurs, which are nested in the middle of the reptiles. It's totally a cockatoo. And a dinosaur. But is this mini cockatoo a good pet? And is the cockatiel the best pet dinosaur for you? To help you figure this out, we'll have to give the cockatiel a score based on our 5 categories, which are handleability, care, hardiness, availability, and upfront costs. When it comes to handleability, we give the cockatiel a score of 4 out of 5. In many ways, handling a cockatiel is a lot like handling other parrots, especially, well, cockatoos. But this is a better score than we gave to cockatoos. And part of the reason for that better score rhymes with cockatoo. Poo. Birds poop, and even if you potty train them, they're still going to get you from time to time. Being pooped on is just part of interacting with any bird that will sit on you for any significant length of time. And cockatiels, they're no exception. But at least their poops are smaller than those of larger parrots, including other cockatoos. They also have something more like a pair of pocket knife scissors than a bolt cutter. So if you get bitten by a cockatiel, it won't be nearly as bad or sever anything. Cockatiels are generally one of the most handleable and personable of all birds. But you will still need to build trust with your bird. And this is an intelligent bird. If you violate their trust, you might not get it back easily. You can buy a hand-tamed cockatiel. If you don't, then you're going to have a ton of trust building to do before they will be handleable really at all. And you better know what you're doing or you may do more harm than good. So getting a hand-tamed bird from a breeder or responsible pet store is almost certainly the way you are going to want to go if you want to have a good relationship with your bird. And if you don't want to interact with your cockatiel, then there is no reason to get a cockatiel. For better or worse, a cockatiel is going to need multiple hours of interaction every day, especially if you only have one of them. This is an extremely social bird, and they won't deal well with being neglected. But this is also one of the most affectionate of all pets that you can get. If you want a best friend and you don't want a dog, then a cockatiel might be the right fit for you. Just know that you need to be its best friend too, especially if you're its only friend. But before you commit to a feathered best friend, do know that they produce a lot of dust, so make sure that you're not allergic to that dust. Oh boy, it's time for another Magic Spoon taste-off. Today's contestants, one of our prior champions, Fruity, Frosted, just to make sure that Fruity remains better than Frosted. And I think we've got 2 new competitors. We've got Chocolate Chip Cookie, which you know that's got to be good, and Honey Nut. So let's get this underway. And thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this video. Did you know that each Magic Spoon cereal is high in protein, like 13 to 14 grams per serving? They're also keto-friendly at 4 grams of net carbs per serving, 0 grams of sugar, gluten-free, grain-free, and no artificial colors or sweeteners. That's amazing. Basically, the cereal from your youth, but upgraded with grown-up ingredients. If you want to have your own Magic Spoon taste-off, click the link down in the description. Get your own Magic Spoon cereal today. You can even build your very own custom 4 cereal box for your own custom taste-off. And if you use my code, Clint, you'll get $5 off. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Well, I have my thoughts on this cereal and our entire competition. So, this is hands down the best chocolate chip cookie cereal I've ever had, and yet still, it lands in the number 4 spot in this lineup because these are fantastic. So, fruity, frosted honey nut and chocolate chip cookie. That's my order, unless we're eating the whole box. Then it goes like that. So click the link in the description or scan this QR code that's right here on the screen. Use the code Clint for $5 off. Just go to magicspoon.com/Clint. Save $5 off your order today. For my Canadian and British fans, Magic Spoon also ships to Canada and the UK. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, cockatiels. When it comes to care, we give the cockatiel a score of 2 out of 5. And to talk about the details of cockatiel care is Shay from Prime Pets. She is the owner of this cockatiel, whose name is Gus Gus, no big deal. But she not only keeps a cockatiel, but she was also a breeder registered with the National Cockatiel Society for several years. She's also a civilian, so you do not salute her, but you'd better listen to her, because she knows more about keeping cockatiels than anyone I know. All right, well, thank you so much for being here, Shay.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited to talk about the care of cockatiels. Yeah. Maybe first, would you kind of walk me through a day in the life of a cockatiel owner?
They're my favorite bird. I'll start out by saying that. I love cockatiels. You wake up when they wake up. They'll let you know when it's time to wake up.
About when is that?
Depends. I'm pretty lucky. Mine don't wake up till about 9, but they can come to life as soon as the sun shines. So
I've heard a lot of sleep is really important for them.
Yes.
Maybe like 12 hours a night?
And specific bedtime for them is great. Whether that's if they're in a room by themselves or you cover them with a blanket. If they don't get enough sleep, they're grumpy. It's important.
So you wake up when they wake up.
Yep, pretty much.
And then what?
Big thing with them is their food, fresh food and water. One of the biggest things with birds, really, cockatiels too, they need a good fresh diet. An all-seed diet is not very healthy for these guys. It causes lots of issues. Fatty liver disease, for one, obesity, very, very obese with just a seed diet. One thing I recommend with these guys is fresh fruits, fresh veggies, fresh grains. A lot of bird owners make fresh chop. So that's got your grains, your oats, your fruits and veggies, and a little bit of nuts. So some people wake up in the mornings, get them their breakfast with their kids or themselves. They need lots of attention throughout the day, especially if you've only got one, like you mentioned. Play, training. If you want a cockatiel that just lives in a cage by itself, it's not going to be a very fun cockatiel.
No. Or have a very good life.
No, not at all. But getting them out, lots of enrichment, lots of activities. They're very smart. They can learn how to talk. They can learn how to play games. This guy, if he was not so nervous, we put him on our finger and go, woo, woo, and he bounces up and down and makes his little chirpy sounds with my kids. You can teach them to play with balls, all kinds of things like that. So lots of enrichment is really important. For these guys, especially if they don't have a friend with them.
Would you generally recommend more than one cockatiel?
If you don't have the time to put in with them, yeah, definitely. If you're not going to be their best friend, they need a friend. But they probably won't be as handleable unless you're working with both of them. Mm-hmm. They're from a flock. They need their home. So he has been raised from day one. I fed him every hour. He was with me all the time, and so he only knows people. He's been with other birds, but he prefers the company of people to other birds. Mm-hmm. Ones that you just go get from the aviary that the parents raise, it would be a little bit of a different situation. They would prefer the company of a bird. That
makes a lot of sense, and those are a lot more difficult to get to be very
mm-hmm.
handleable.
It is.
You were telling me a little bit earlier about when handling
mm-hmm.
birds.
Yes.
Cockatiels, as just an example, mm-hmm. there are ways to pet them
yes.
and ways to avoid. Can you kind of tell me a little more about that?
So birds, there's appropriate ways to pet them and there is not appropriate ways. With birds, the only places you really want to pet your bird is on his little feet down here and then up on their heads. You want a head scratch? They love little head scratches.
Yeah, the way he bends down to ask for head scratches is adorable.
You don't ever want to pet their backs or, your first thought is to pet a bird like this, like you would a dog or a cat. Mm-hmm. With birds, that is very stimulating for them. It can make them a little bit more aggressive, a little more clingy and needy, because that's part of their mating behavior in the wild. So you definitely want to avoid interacting with your bird.
Send some real strong signals.
Definitely ones you don't want.
When it comes to housing, mm-hmm. What are the best ways to house cockatiels?
You gotta have a good sized cage. You can't just slap these guys in a little tiny cage. As you can see, his little tail down here, I don't know if you can see how it's kind of bent at the end.
Just from
coming here in his little travel cage. You've got to have enough room that they can stretch their wings out, that they can go from perch to perch. They need more than just one perch too. They need to be able to get on all different types of levels. They need perches that are going to help keep their nails trimmed. They need toys and interaction and mirrors and all kinds of things. Keep them entertained throughout the day while you're at work or at school.
If their nails get too long, what do you do then?
I actually use baby fingernail clippers.
Okay.
And I just clip them with fingernail clippers myself.
Probably have to be very careful.
Very careful. If you get too short, these guys are really, really fragile if they break a blood feather, they can bleed out really, really quickly. It's important to have like Quick Stop or flour, cornstarch, something like that. If they accidentally break a blood feather or you trim their nails too short, they can go downhill really quick.
We'll add that to the ways to kill them. Now,
yes, definitely.
When it comes to other ways that you might accidentally kill a cockatiel, talk to me about that.
There's a lot. Lots of ways. Things you wouldn't even think of. I have 3-year-old twins, and basically the things that would be off limits for them, and candles, things you wouldn't think about. Just your wax warmers. They can get into the wax. They chew cords. Your Christmas tree. If they get out and want to go sit on the Christmas tree, they're gonna chew the cords. They're very, very curious. They love to just chew on things and pick at things. You cannot use the self-cleaning feature on your oven. It's horrible. You have to clean your oven. You can't use that feature because it kind of how you talked about the pans and stuff like that. It creates that toxin in the air, and the fumes will kill them. So there's lots.
Birds are intense. Let's see. Food. You talked a little bit about fresh chop.
Yep.
And then there are other diets I think that you recommend too. Obviously not a seed, especially exclusively a seed diet.
Pellets.
What are some kinds of pellets you'd recommend?
I really like Rowdy Bush. That's one of my favorite. There's Rowdy Bush. There's Zupreme. Trying to think of the other ones off the top of my head. Those are the two I typically have in stock. Is Rowdy Bush and Zupreme. I think
Does Missouri have anything good?
They've got some good stuff. Yes. They have a lot. My personal favorite is Rowdy Bush. That's what we typically use with the pellets. It is hard to switch them though. If you've got your bird on a seed diet, it's hard to switch them, but you just slowly start mixing in the pellets, start mixing in the fruits and the veggies and the grains. You'll slowly wean them off, but they're going to be picky.
When it comes to chop, are there things that you really recommend including in a chop and things that you recommend avoiding?
Yeah, lots. Spinach can be a calcium binder, so don't use a whole lot of spinach. Lots of dark leafy greens are good. I make my own, and we use like quinoa, we'll use kale, we'll use turnip greens, collard greens, bell peppers, broccoli, cauliflower, carrots. Very light on the fruit. You don't want to overdo it with fruits, with the sugars. You got to make sure if you do give them any nuts, it's very sparingly and not salted. They should not have salt. But yeah, avocados are a big no-no.
Yeah,
chocolate, caffeine, beer. It's not funny. Don't give them your beer or your caffeine. Onions aren't good, but squashes are really good too. They really like squashes and sweet potatoes. Super starchy isn't great, so like just a baked potato is not super great for them.
How much interaction per day?
I tell people when I get customers in, minimum half-hour a day. Minimum, like bare minimum if you just can't. But
if you've got no time for your bird that day, still half an hour.
At least. But if you want a good bird, I mean, you gotta put in the time, hours and hours and hours, and let them be your buddy. Let them hang out with you. And a big thing with birds too is you gotta be the boss. You gotta, even if they kind of gripe at you a little bit, you gotta show them you're not afraid. You gotta don't be aggressive. Don't hurt them. Don't make them do things they don't want to do. But one thing, birds have a big personality. Dominance. Especially if they're up higher than you. That's a big thing with birds. If they're up higher than you, they're the big guy. So it's like when they're on your shoulder. I learned in Star Wars,
I know.
Yeah, on your shoulder.
Got the high ground.
It's game over.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they're on your shoulder and stuff, sometimes you can see when I try to get him down, he's like, no. But once you get him down, they're like, okay, they're just little loves. And so just being front with them, making sure they know you're the boss, just like you would with the dog or a cat. You're the boss. You can't get away with being naughty.
What about cage furnishings and water?
Water is extremely important that they have fresh water and clean out those those water dishes. They can build up bacteria and algae and stuff like that. It's really important to have fresh water. I don't recommend doing anything other than like a dish. I've seen some people with like the filling ones and it slowly, trickles the water in, but it's really common for their little beaks to get caught in there or for things to just go wrong there. Fresh food every day is a great thing. So
Other cage furnishings like perches.
Perches, very important.
Varying sizes.
Varying sizes, varying thicknesses. You got to make sure that it's something that it's not too thin that they're gonna, have a hard time gripping, but it's not so big that they're falling off of it. And then having at least one sanded perch to help with those nail trimming is important. And then, like you said, different levels. They like to have, one by their food so they can easily get in and out of their food and water dish. One up higher where they feel kind of out of the way and a little bit more comfortable, and then but not so many that they can't fly or can't get around. If they're squished and cramped by all their furnishings, it's probably not the best.
That's an important thing to consider.
Yeah.
A lot of bird cages have wire bottoms. Seems like that's probably not very good for their feet.
They're not very good for their feet if they're going to walk around down there. Typically, birds try to avoid the bottom of the cage. If they're hanging out and spending time down at the bottom of the cage, I would be a little concerned.
Maybe something to go see a vet about.
Yeah, so it's very common to find the wire slats in the bottoms of cages. The ones that I would definitely avoid is sometimes you'll find them with like the checker bottoms. I would not do those because those are really easy for them to get their little toenails caught in.
Oh, yeah, because where they cross.
But the spacing is also really important on the sides. Just has to be big enough that they can't get their little heads through or get stuck or sneak out. So.
And their heads are smaller than they look.
Oh, so much smaller.
I was having fun squeezing his neck. Like, it is so way thinner than a pencil.
It is. It is
and
so
then
weird.
that head is not as big as it appears.
Yep. And these guys love showers too. It takes a minute to get them used to it. If you got a bird and haven't showered it for a long time, spray bottle misting it. This guy loves to sit on a perch in the shower and just sits there, and it's so cute. And then when they get out, it's so funny because they're just so tiny, little scrawny neck. Making sure it's important to make sure they get dried off really good though, or they could get sick.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Does that help with the dust as well?
It does. It does. It helps a lot with the dust. These guys are pretty dusty, as you can see, and they have their it's like the little straw sheath that goes over their feathers. So that kind of helps create a lot of dust and dander. So helping with misting, spraying them with a spray bottle will help a lot with that. You can also get an air purifier, but you have to be really careful.
Yeah, you said you had a disaster with
I had a disaster with some finches that I knew you weren't supposed to use the ionizer button on the air purifier, but I have 3-year-old twins that decided to push the button and I did not realize it, and it creates the negative ions that the birds then breathe in. They're just so sensitive to anything in the air, cigarette smoke, anything. Just gotta be so careful. And so if you are gonna get an air purifier to kind of help cut down on the dander, you gotta watch out for that.
I haven't heard anybody talk about this, but is vaping an issue around?
I'm sure it is. I would not be surprised if it is.
It'd be shocking to me if it's not.
Yeah, if it's not great for your lungs, it's definitely not good for their lungs. Their respiratory systems are so fragile. So even the things you wouldn't think about, a lot of people don't even use standard cleaners. They use vinegar water for their cleaners just because of how sensitive their little immune systems are and their respiratory systems.
I think that has been a lot of detail. It's a very serious commitment, but for a parrot, other than maybe budgies, this is probably about as low-key as a parrot gets. That doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah.
Though. And you said they're cleaner than budgies.
These guys, it is so weird. You wouldn't think so because they're bigger than budgies. But
budgies like to throw stuff.
They throw everything. And they have, I don't know what it is, but they're always losing their little down feathers. These guys do too, but for whatever reason, budgies like to throw their feathers everywhere too. They're just so much messier. And it's really hard to come by a hand-tamed budgie. Not a lot of breeders. I have bred these guys, and they're a lot easier to hand feed than a budgie. I've hand-fed budgies as well, and tiny beaks, it's really hard to do. So it's hard to find a hand-fed.
We'll get to the cost of these, but that's kind of the problem. Budgies are so inexpensive that nobody's going to put the time in, or almost no, unless they just have a love for budgies. They're not going to put the time in to hand raising that budgie. But these, though they're a very inexpensive parrot, they're just expensive enough that it's worth it to breeders to put the time into each individual bird and get it to be like this, instead of an animal that tries desperately to avoid it.
Yep. This is what a good hand-fed, hand-raised cockatiel looks like. He's just the love. I can put him on my 3-year-old's arm, and my 3-year-olds with supervision will play with him, and he doesn't mind. They're a good bird, but you got to know what you're doing and be willing to put in that time and effort.
Thank you so much, Shay, and thank you for the amazing job you're doing at Prime Pets. You've really turned that into an amazing store, and I just see it getting better all the time. I'd like to take a moment just to say thank you to our patrons on Patreon, and many of you know that here at Clint's Reptile Room, we are doing a huge renovation this month, and next month we're having all sorts of people that you know from YouTube out here for a really cool grand opening celebration. And we've made tickets to that celebration available first to our patrons on Patreon, and then to make it even better, there will be a live stream of some of the festivities available only to our patrons on Patreon. So if you've ever considered supporting this channel, which helps us do so many amazing things, there's never been a better time than now. When it comes to hardiness, we give the cockatiel a score of 3 out of 5. There's a reason that these are often considered to be beginner birds. Beginner bird, though, is a crazy thing to say, as virtually all birds are massively life-altering. But these are hardy for birds. But birds are not very hardy. They like to die in diverse ways, not the least of which being related to impurities in the air, as Shay already mentioned. I still need to make a video about how birds breathe, but it is way different and way more efficient than the way you breathe. They pull everything out of the air, and if that air has, say, fumes from the use of non-stick cookware, then they die. And that is one of a host of impurities in the air that might kill them. Then there are things they might eat. Loads of houseplants, chocolate, and avocados, just for starters. The list is long, but distinguished. You better memorize it. Then there are windows and mirrors, open toilets. Imagine a toddler that can fly. How many ways could it die in your house? That said, if you can avoid accidentally killing your cockatiel, then it can easily live 15 to 25 years, which is a long time, but not generational pet kind of time. When it comes to availability, we give the cockatiel a score of 5 out of 5. The reality is, you can find these guys basically anywhere that sells pets. You'll see them at most pet shops, though I don't necessarily recommend getting them at just any old pet shop because a lot of those probably aren't well socialized. You can probably find them at bird expos. I would imagine virtually any bird expo is going to have cockatiels. And even online, if you want something special, I would go straight to a breeder or to a pet shop that you know is doing a lot of work to socialize their cockatiels. One place I might recommend would be Prime Pets in Spanish Fork, Utah. When it comes to upfront costs, we give the cockatiel a score of 3 out of 5. Cockatiels are, for a parrot, very reasonably priced. In fact, they're so reasonably priced and such a large commitment that if the price of the bird is an obstacle, don't get one. The enclosure that you get should be large enough for them to fly around. Most pets don't fly. If you want a pet that doesn't fly, the options are many. So an enclosure that is large enough so that it can fly, but with bars close enough together so that it can't fit its head through them, unless you're looking for more ways to kill your bird. Be sure to provide plenty of differently sized perches, water bowls, food bowls, toys, a diversity of proper foods. Basically all of the same things that you would need for a cockatoo, but not as large. Not cheap, but money is not the biggest reason not to get one. But do budget some money for the destruction they can and will do in your home, because that's going to happen. And that is why overall we give the cockatiel a score of 3.4 out of 5. If you want a best friend for the next 2 decades and you can live without perfume, houseplants, and extended vacations, then the cockatiel might just be the best pet dinosaur for you. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon. I'd like to say thank you just for a moment to all of these incredible people. Look at them. Look at all these names. Look at them. Look at them. These are people that have supported this channel and allow us to create this sort of content on such a regular basis. So please thank them, and if you'd like to consider joining them, please check out our Patreon. Imagine a toddler that can fly. How many ways could it die in your house?
That is a terrible.
You have to keep it. It's amazing.
The list is long, but distinguished.
Well, the list is long but distinguished.
Yo, so's my
Cockatiel.